Who are some of the most low-down, despicable criminals? Let's get right to it and find out, starting with number 5. Throw away the key. Jesus Ayala and Jzamir Keys had hit former police chief Andreas Probst with their car while he was riding his bike. They recorded the incident, and judging from what these geniuses posted online, the hit was intentional. Ayala and Keys are now both on trial for their senseless crime. During court, they giggled and grinned at each other, and it seems like Keys flipped off the victim's family during their court appearance. We covered these guys' story in a previous video, but we want to keep them in the news while the trial is still going on by the release of this video. In footage that went viral, the teens approached Probst from behind as he cycled in the bike lane early in the morning. The driver honked the horn, and then, sadly, things escalated and turned tragic. Although the teens were minors when Probst passed away, they were still charged with murder and tried as adults. Ayala and Keys both showed no signs of remorse in court. Actually, they showed the opposite. The two hid their faces from the cameras and covered their mouths to suppress their laughter. David Westbrook, Ayala's public defender, also allegedly giggled alongside his client, which is such bizarre behavior for a lawyer who is possibly defending his client's life. Probst's wife, Kristen Williams, and his daughter, Taylor Probst, were in attendance for the proceeding, where the criminal duo also allegedly flipped them off and laughed in their direction. Although Kristen and Taylor were furious and hurt by the teens' mockery, it didn't stop them from showing up to court to bring the case the publicity it deserved. Kristen also wore her late husband's smartwatch, which he wore the day of the accident. Although the screen was cracked, it was a reminder to fight in honor of Probst's memory. The teens pleaded not guilty to all charges. In released body cam footage directly after his arrest, Ayala seemed to be more interested in the magnitude of his crime and whether or not it would make him famous. So the attitude really isn't that surprising. And how are you going to act like running over an old man on a bike from behind is this tough guy thing that gives you street cred? There's just so much to be said about all of this, from how senseless it was to social media's effect on it to the direction of society. Number 4. The Accountant. Not only did accountant Jeffrey Bevan scam $2.2 million from the Bermudan government, but he also stole £50,000 from his own mother. Bevan worked as a senior manager at the Department of the Accountant General of Bermuda. The department installed a new finance system while he was there, which he exploited to steal from the government in 52 separate thefts over the course of 2 years. He transferred the majority of the money to British bank accounts, which he used to pay off his mortgage, invest in 11 properties, and to buy a couple Mercedes. While Bevan enjoyed a luxury lifestyle with family vacations to the Caribbean, the US, and Europe, he was hiding a big secret: his gambling problem. In 6 years, Bevan made roughly 18,853 online bets, which is around 260 bets a month. We're not big sports bettors here, but that seems like a lot. Bevan's family eventually returned to the UK from Bermuda, but Bevan still needed money for more bets if he was going to maintain his pace of a bajillion sports bets a month. So he targeted his mother, Lavinia. Bevan convinced Lavinia to write a check for £50,000, which he promised to invest on her behalf. But he never invested that money. Soon after stealing from his mother, Bevan was arrested for his crimes in Bermuda and was sentenced to 7 years and 4 months in jail. He attended the trial for scamming his mother via video link from his jail cell. Sadly, Lavinia passed away before the proceeding, but Bevan's brother, Jason, gave an impact statement on her behalf. Jason told the court that Lavinia would be horrified by her son's actions, and the prosecution accused Bevan of taking advantage of his mother's vulnerability. The court sentenced Bevan to a further 18 months in prison, which he would serve consecutively to his prior jail term. Gambling issues can lead people to do things they normally never would, but to scam your own mom, and then she passes away before your trial? Oof. Number 3. Everything is staged. Here's another son of the year, Michael Cabrera. Cabrera faked his own kidnapping to scam money from his mother as ransom. Cabrera and his mother appear to be very close, especially as she was widowed. He frequently posted about her being a great mom and dedicated parent. For Mother's Day, Cabrera even wrote a heartfelt post about how his mother was a wonderful person that taught him to be strong and believe in himself. Then he scammed her a few months later. One morning, Cabrera's mother received a series of texts from her 31-year-old son claiming he was in trouble. Later that day, a man called her and demanded she wire money in her son's name to Western Union. The stranger threatened the anxious mother that he would hurt her son if she didn't cough up the money. The kidnapper then handed the phone to Cabrera, who pleaded with her to hand over the money to pay his ransom. But instead of complying with the kidnapper's demands, the mother of two decided to reach out to law enforcement. The cops rushed over to Cabrera's apartment, where the only thing he was kidnapped by was his couch. He was taken into custody and then charged with second-degree larceny and fourth-degree conspiracy. Michael sounds like a real catch, ladies, and he's probably ready to settle down with that special someone if you're lucky. Number 2. Responsible banking. Scammers stole $460,000 from Alex Shaw, an Australian man who was diagnosed with dementia. Alex's son, Victor, took his 78-year-old father to his local bank when a teller pulled Victor aside to tell him that his father was the victim of a scam. Alex's memory had been in decline for several years, which made it difficult for Victor to figure out how his father had lost his life savings. Fortunately, Victor found notes that Alex had taken detailing the dates, names, and conversations he'd had with the scammers. The fraudsters, who were based in Thailand, told Alex to buy hundreds of dollars worth of Apple gift cards from grocery stores and give the callers the serial numbers. They also urged Alex to transfer money into a crypto account and encouraged him to click on links promising him thousands of dollars in grant money. Alex's notes contained references to AnyDesk, a software program that grants scammers the ability to remotely access computers. Victor believed the software was the main way the scammers drained his father's account, as there were several transfers ranging between $10,000 and $25,000 made to an unknown individual's account. ANZ, Alex's bank, picked up on the suspicious transfers and suspended his account, but the scammers responded by coaching Alex on how to reactivate it. Once Alex regained access to his account, the scammers completely drained it. Victor filed a formal complaint with ANZ, but the bank told him they were unlikely to recover all of his father's life savings. 3 months later, Victor received a letter from ANZ informing him they would refund the entire amount. The bank acknowledged that it should have done more to support and protect Alex given his issues with previous scams. ANZ said that cyber criminals are known to target some of its most vulnerable customers. The refreshing thing about this story is that the bank actually said that they should have done more to protect Alex, considering banks usually just say, "Oh well, that's too bad for you." Instead, this bank reimbursed the full $460,000. The ending makes us happy, but there must have been some pretty obvious negligence in order for the bank to hand over that amount. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay tuned right here for our past release to find out how this lady scammed these athletes out of their retirement money. Number 1. Instant loan blackmail. Scammers across the world use predatory loans to entrap and humiliate their victims, putting them through so much harassment that dozens of people have ended everything as a result. Although many apps offered instant loans, they usually weren't predatory, but there were some that harvested people's contacts, ID cards, and photos, which they used against their customers. If these users didn't repay their loans in time, the apps would share their information with call centers, where customer service agents were trained to bully people into repayment. BBC News did a special report on the widespread prevalence of these types of scams. One victim, Bhumi Sinha, turned to several loan apps to borrow 47,000 rupees, or roughly $565. The money was to help keep her afloat while she waited for business expenses to come through, and the funds were available almost immediately, although the app deducted a big chunk for expenses. Bhumi was supposed to repay the loan 7 days later, but she didn't have the money and had to borrow from another app to make the payment. Her debt spiraled out of control, and soon she quickly owed $24,000 to multiple apps. Debt collectors called her up to 200 times a day. They bombarded her with insults and accused her of lying when she said she'd made a payment, even though she was telling the truth. The callers knew everything about Sinha, including where she lived. They threatened to message all of the 486 contacts in her phone to tell them that Sinha was a thief and slept around. The callers also made it clear that they were prepared to tarnish her daughter's reputation too. Sinha borrowed money from friends, family, and 69 other apps. She fell into a dark depression, with her phone starting to ring at 7 a.m. and continuing all day. After repaying all of the money, Sinha prayed the calls would stop. However, one company, Asin Loan, still wouldn't stop. Sinha's hope that her life would return to normal once she took care of her debts was destroyed when a coworker received a questionable picture of her. Although it was a photoshopped image with Sinha's head on someone else's body, it was still incredibly embarrassing. Sinha fell into such a dark emotional place that she considered ending her life. Sinha was far from the only person that fell victim to one of these scams. People across Asia, Africa, and Latin America had their lives destroyed by instant loan app scams. Most victims were too ashamed to speak up about the scam, making it easy for the perpetrators to stay anonymous and invisible. A debt recovery agent who worked at one of these call centers, going by the name Rohan, said customers would often cry and threaten to harm themselves. He went undercover for the BBC at multiple call centers in India, where he recorded agents harassing clients. The agents followed scripts they were given by their managers, and after bullying and humiliating victims over the phone, the agents would hang up and laugh. Rohan and an undercover journalist posing as an investor met with Vishal Chareja, a manager at the Callflex Corporation call center, to learn more about the company's shady business practices. Chareja explained that customers give the app access to all of the contacts on their phones. Companies like Callflex Corporation were hired to help recover the money, and if a customer missed a payment, they would hassle the person and all of their phone contacts. The staff had permission to say whatever they wanted to get their repayment. One of Callflex's victims was Kearney Munika, a 24-year-old student who was preparing to get her master's in Australia. Kearney's first transaction on a loan app was for $120, but soon she had borrowed $3,600 from 55 different apps. She couldn't cope with the constant harassment and vulgar messages, and when the agent started calling her phone contacts, she ended her life. Munika's father answered her phone while he was at the hospital with her. When he told the agent that she had passed, the agent insisted that she still had to pay, which, who does this? Hari, one of the agents that worked at a call center doing recovery for one of the apps Munika used, was growing uneasy about his job. He worked on the team that made the initial phone calls, which were often polite at the beginning. His boss instructed the staff to completely go after customers and encouraged them to text the victims' contacts to make them look like thieves and fraudsters. Nobody took it seriously when customers threatened to end their lives, but when people acted on their threats, agents looked to their boss, Porusham Tak, for guidance. Tak was furious and told his staff that their jobs were to make recoveries. He ran the operation with his wife, Liang Tian Tian. Munika unfortunately passed a few months later. Police arrested Tak and Liang as part of an investigation into a case of harassment against the couple, but they were released on bail a few months later. However, the couple was eventually charged. They went into hiding a few months later. Dennis Rodman believed he was free of financial worry while enjoying his retirement from pro basketball. Reality TV appearances and festival DJ gigs kept the money coming in. However, in 2012, he was threatened with contempt of court for not paying his child support. Lawyers brought up Rodman's spending habits and combed through his financial records. He was asked about several Victoria's Secret purchases, and he told the court that he had never been there. Someone was spending plenty of Dennis Rodman's money, and it wasn't him. Peggy Fulford had been called a larger-than-life figure who can make anyone feel like $1 million, which is good considering she was stealing way more than that from her clients. Peggy told them whatever they needed to hear to make them feel comfortable handing over control of their finances. Now, financial managers for athletes and celebrities do exist. They help manage their clients' money by paying bills, investing, and controlling their spending habits. 22-year-old rookies with a few $1 million in their pockets don't often make the best financial decisions with it. She started by weaving a web of fake credentials. According to her phony resume, she studied at Harvard Law and Harvard Business School. She made millions on Wall Street and was sitting on a hefty sum of money. Peggy weaved this false version of herself. She came off as the hero these athletes needed. Little did they know, she was pulling them like flies into her web. As a so-called millionaire, Peggy knew how important it is to protect your fortune. She had already made it. All she wanted to do was help. She proved this by doing the work pro bono, calling her clients family and saying, "That's what you do for family." Her family-first mentality lured victims into a false sense of security, making them perfect for her predatory scam. The more money you're playing with, the more attention you attract. Peggy seemed unworried about this old adage and, in hindsight, played her game rather recklessly. However, discrepancies eventually brought her to the attention of the FBI. Under their scrutiny, her haphazard lies began to reveal themselves. Unfortunately, it took the authorities a long time to build a case against her. During this time, she built an extensive list of victims full of professional athletes that saw her as their friend. Some people looked to her like the adopted mother of their families. By the time her crimes were brought to light, she had stolen millions from stars like Dennis Rodman and Ricky Williams. Investigators and victims teamed up to expose Peggy for the fraud she is. She never studied at Harvard, let alone graduated. She was never sitting on millions in Wall Street earnings either. Her lavish lifestyle was funded by money stolen from her A-list clients. But her web was so tightly spun that she fooled the public for a long time. BET even ordered a pilot episode for a reality TV show called The Peggy Show. Peggy was so entangled in her deception perception that she seemed to be fooling herself. She purchased a mansion in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and enjoyed a lifestyle filled with big clients and giant parties. Everything was on the up for Peggy, and the next logical move was a reality TV show to document it all. Peggy's life fit the mold for reality TV, especially at the genre's height in 2011. The Kardashians and the Real Housewives dominated the reality TV game, and Peggy wanted a piece of the action. She was a powerful woman who knew what she wanted and didn't let anyone get in her way. A pitch document said the show would be named after its star, calling it The Peggy Show. After a bit of bouncing around, the BET network paid for a pilot episode. This reality TV show was to be about Peggy and her sports management empire. With 31 professional athletes under her wing, nobody disputed her empire at the time. The show would document her position as CEO of King Management Group, the financial advisory and management company she founded. There would be recurring characters like family members and famous clients. Her brother Elkin Jr. would be something of a co-star. He was close with Dennis Rodman and even accompanied him on his now famous trip to North Korea. The show would portray her as more than just a financial advisor and instead focus on Mama Peggy, as her clients would often call her. Dennis Rodman is one of the most well-known names in basketball. He played on the famous 90s Bulls with legends such as Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan. Rodman also became known for his antics, as he was constantly in the news for one thing or another for his lifestyle. Rodman was introduced to Peggy in the mid-2000s after he had already retired from basketball. He was still pulling in over $1 million per year, using his celebrity making money from things such as guest appearances. Rodman's lavish life and overflowing bank account made him a perfect target for Peggy's scam. Peggy told him she was already wealthy and just wanted to protect his money. Rodman, just like all the others, fell for it. He trusted and respected her so much that he thanked her during his 2011 Hall of Fame speech. However, all this love clouded his judgment. When red flags started popping up, he never considered it could be her. Peggy, now on the defensive, convinced him that his spending habits were the problem. Ever brave, she used this opportunity to gain more control. Peggy seized Rodman's account and cut off access to his debit card, saying that he couldn't control himself or his spending. Then, per the beginning of our story, used it to go on a Victoria's Secret shopping spree. Rodman wasn't the first professional athlete Peggy had ensnared. Ricky Williams, an NFL star, running back, and Heisman Trophy winner, met Peggy in 1999 after having an interior decorator visit his home. He was to be on an episode of MTV Cribs, so he needed a touch-up to his place. The decorator brought along a friend named Peggy. She and Ricky became like family, or so he thought. She kept up her illusion quite well, selling him the same story she gave everyone. She became a close family friend, throwing a baby shower for his wife, and even drove her to the hospital when it came time to have the baby. She also hosted their wedding reception, where Rodman made an appearance. Peggy offered to take care of the Williams' finances and invest on their behalf. You can argue that meeting Williams was the best thing that ever happened for Peggy's scam. She was introduced to dozens of NFL and NBA stars in the market for a professional money manager through him. For Peggy, it was like shooting fish in a barrel as she gathered more and more contacts. However, Kristen Williams, Ricky's wife, would prove to be Peggy's downfall. In 2012, Ricky Williams' wife, Kristen Barnes, noticed their car had been repossessed. Then letters started coming in from the IRS claiming Ricky owed money in back taxes. Baffled, the couple contacted Peggy to ask for an explanation. As their money manager, Peggy was supposed to be making their car payments and paying their taxes. After receiving a second letter saying that Ricky owed $375,000 in unpaid taxes and interest, Kristen became suspicious of Peggy. So she asked a friend that went to Harvard to check the alumni for Peggy Fulford. Lo and behold, nobody named Peggy Fulford ever went to Harvard. Kristen kept putting the pieces together. She contacted the Charles Schwab Corporation, where Peggy supposedly invested their money, but no funds were found in their name. She even called her bank to find that she'd been barred from accessing her account. The bank manager suggested she get a lawyer. They were missing almost $5 million and were devastated to learn that Peggy had been playing them the whole time. Kristen took that bank manager's advice and filed a civil suit against Peggy. When in court, the family seemed less angry and more hurt by what happened. Ricky even said to the judge, "For me, I'm curious, where the money is." They just wanted their money back, shocked by the reality that had washed over them. Now that the lawsuit was filed and big money was in play, the FBI got involved. Peggy Fulford had built a house out of lies, and FBA agent Jim Hawkins was there to tear it down. When dealing with a lifelong con artist, even getting their name right can be a challenge. Peggy had multiple aliases like Peggy King, Peggy Berard, and Peggy Simpson. Jackson, mostly stemming from her previous marriages. However, her name wasn't the only thing she lied about, and as Hawkins dug, he discovered more and more. Peggy was running over 85 bank accounts and using them to bounce money around. She also started shell corporations and celebrities' names to launder her stolen money. Company names included the Dennis Rodman Group LLC, Dennis Rodman Group and Associates LLC, and Dennis Rodman Inc. In Peggy's thick web of lies, there is one that nobody could find a reason behind. Peggy lied about Elkin Jr. being her little brother. He was actually her son. Peggy needed her victims to trust her, and she did so by employing a bag of psychological tricks. She projected confidence and power to make her clients believe she knew how to protect their money. Peggy pegged herself as the hero who'd come to save the day, and money management was her superpower. Peggy worked for free because her clients were her family. She threw parties, she hosted weddings, she even drove soon-to-be and new mothers to and from the hospital. We can picture her holding Kristen Barnes' hand as she delivered her first child, assuring her that everything's gonna be all right. Mama Peggy is here. She needed to distract her clients for her con to work, and she did so by becoming their friends. Peggy's con was dependent on her clients loving her, and she was good at making that happen. 2013, shortly after Dennis Rodman claimed not to be an avid Victoria's Secret shopper, Peggy's scam circled the drain. She filed for bankruptcy to try and keep some property from being foreclosed. All of her luxury items were seized, and the FBI was hot on her trail. All of her lies came back to bite her in the end. A $300,000 transfer made in 2013 was discovered. The money came from the Wells Fargo account of Lex Hillard, a client and NFL fullback. The money was used to close on a half-acre plot of land in Houston, Texas. The new owner of that land? Peggy. That transfer put her in Agent Hawkins' backyard. Dennis Rodman fired Peggy in a letter and condemned her for using his name for the shell companies. After a 2016 FBI interview, Hawkins was satisfied with the evidence he'd collected. Along with two other agents, he knocked on her door and led Mama Peggy out in handcuffs. As they walked her out, they discovered one last con, a check for $200,000. She had told a doctor that she was planning to turn an old high school into an assisted care facility. When the owners of the property were contacted, they had never heard of Peggy. With all the evidence gathered against her, Peggy's court case was open and shut. The lifelong swindler had to stand across from her victims and listen to the pain she caused them. Peggy pleaded guilty, and the judge sentenced her to 10 years behind bars. She was also ordered to pay $5 million in restitution to the people she conned. Unfortunately, people will always target athletes for their wealth. There were over $600 million in recorded losses to fraud between 2004 and 2014 for professional athletes. San Antonio Spurs star Tim Duncan found out firsthand how these scammers come in all shapes, sizes, and suits. He lost more than $20 million to a shady financial advisor that used him to pay debts. However, he is not alone in his struggles. Mark Sanchez and two other baseball players lost $30 million to a scammer claiming to be a devout Christian with a mind for charity. It seems like many athletes get their money young and have no idea what to do with it, leaving them vulnerable to swindlers like Peggy. They will always be seen as targets due to their high wealth and low experience. Education and helpful advice from veterans of their sport could help prevent them from being preyed upon. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section what you'd rather do. Have a 4-hour dinner with any one person in the world you choose, or $100,000 cash.